how many of you have actually shopped at Zappos before? Oh, wow. So normally when I do this survey, the ratio's about 2 to 1 women to men. And a lot of guys I ask say they haven't actually personally shopped from us, but their wives or significant others have. And a lot of times it's actually on their behalf. And I was giving a tour a few years ago to an executive from one of the major record labels. And for those of you who may not know, we're actually based out of Las Vegas, and we moved actually from Silicon Valley to Las Vegas just over 10 years ago. And at the time, we had 90 employees, and about 70 ended up moving with us, and now we're at about 1,500 employees. And we offer tours to the public, so next time you're in Vegas, I encourage you to come take a tour. We offer them Monday through Fridays. So at the time, this was actually in our previous headquarters. We just relocated about a year ago, and I was walking through our merchandising area where I sit, and then went upstairs to our customer loyalty team, and that's our name for our customer service team. And I asked him the exact same question: had he shopped with us before? And he said no, he hadn't personally shopped with us, but he suspected his wife had, because these white boxes would show up on his doorstep, and then they just disappeared, and he'd have no idea what was going on. He didn't know if she was buying more shoes, returning shoes, exchanging shoes, and every time he asked her what was going on, she would just flat out refuse to answer him and change the topic. So as I was going, and you'll see on the tour, on the second floor, there's this whiteboard there where we have different stats for our call center. And I was going through the different stats, like number of phone calls we answered yesterday, percent we answered in 20 seconds or less, sales through the call center, and so on. And as I'm going through these different stats, I turn around, and he's just completely disappeared. And I'm like, that's kind of weird. So I go looking for him, and finally I find him. Turns out he had gone halfway down one of our aisles, sat down next to one of our customer service reps, and forced her to pull up his wife's account. And he discovered that she had spent over $62,000 in her lifetime. So hopefully we weren't instrumental to any divorce proceedings or anything like that. Most people, when they think Zappos, think shoes, because that's how we started. But actually, internally, we have a saying that we're a service company, a customer service company, that just happens to sell shoes. And our hope is that 10 years from now, people won't even realize we started selling shoes online. And in fact, today we sell a lot more than shoes. We sell clothing, handbags, and other product categories. But really, we just want to build the Zappos brand to be about the very best customer service and customer experience. And so we've talked about how one day there could be a Zappos Airlines or a Zappos Hotel. That's really just about delivering the very best service. And so our whole marketing philosophy is to take most of the money we would have normally spent on paid advertising or paid marketing, and rather spend it on that, invest it into customer service and the customer experience. So things like the free shipping both ways and surprise upgrades to overnight shipping, and actually having customer service people that want to provide great customer service and aren't trying to get you off the phone. All those investments we think of as marketing investments, and then we let our customers do the marketing for us through word of mouth. So we've grown from no sales in '99 to 2008 was the first year we hit $1 billion in gross merchandise sales. We're actually doing about triple that now. And the number one driver of all that growth has been through repeat customers and word of mouth. And so for all this focus on customer service being the number one priority for the company, the number one priority, or being what we want to build the Zappos brand to be about, the number one priority of the company is actually not customer service. Our number one priority is company culture. And our whole belief is that if we get the culture right, most of the other stuff, like delivering great customer service or building a long-term enduring brand or business, will just be a natural side effect of that. And so this is how we think of our brand, and this has kind of evolved over the years at Zappos. We have, internally, we refer to it as the 3 C's: clothing, customer service, and company culture. And this is kind of the evolution of how the customer experiences us. Because first they learn that we sell shoes and clothing and other product categories, and then they learn about our customer service philosophy just through the experience. It's not really something we advertise. And then they learn about our values and our company culture, and that's because that's really the platform that makes everything possible, and that's why we offer tours to the public. So we've actually had customers tell us that when they get that perfect outfit or perfect pair of shoes, that Zappos is happiness in a box. And whether it's the happiness that customers feel from getting that perfect outfit or perfect pair of shoes, or the happiness that customers feel from experiencing great customer service, or the happiness that employees feel from being part of a culture where the values of the company match their own personal values, the thing that we realize ties all of these three C's together is that Zappos is really just about delivering happiness, whether it's to customers or employees, and we try to apply that same philosophy to our vendor partners as well, and hence the title of my book that came out in 2010. And so if there's only one thing that you guys remember from this talk, it's this quote, and I wish I knew who said it. I think it might have been the head of an ad agency or something. But this one quote really resonates with me, and it's, "A great brand is a story that never stops unfolding." And it's not something that we've ever purposely thought of at Zappos, but it's just kind of how things naturally evolved over the years. First, we were just about shoes, and then several years later, we decided to layer on customer service, and then the company culture stuff several years after that. And so when the book came out, people said, okay, delivering happiness, I get it, clothing, customer service, and company culture, what's next? And for the longest time, I actually didn't have a great answer for people. And this was actually our previous headquarters. We were in Henderson, which is about 25 minutes or so outside of downtown Vegas. It's a suburb of Vegas. And as we started growing, because we went from the 70 employees to now 1,500, we started expanding into 3 different buildings eventually. And that had a very real impact on our culture. The people that were in the building at the top of the hill never got to see the people that were in my building or the other building. And so we started looking for a place where that could become our permanent headquarters, that we could call home and have enough land to expand upon and house everyone under one roof. And surprisingly, it was hard to find anywhere in the Vegas Valley. And we actually got to the point where we thought, okay, maybe we'll just buy a big plot of land somewhere and then we can build something that meets our needs. And then we found out, actually, this is the former City Hall. The city of Las Vegas was building a new City Hall, and we found out that the former City Hall in downtown Vegas was going to become available, and we were super excited about it because it met all the requirements. And so, oh, by the way, this is a year ago, just a little over a year ago when we first moved into City Hall. This was our ribbon cutting. We actually set a new world record. It was a ribbon that was over a mile long, and it was most number of people simultaneously cutting a ribbon. We had, I think, 1,500 or so people. And then someone decided it would be a good idea to have a happy hour afterwards with 1,500 pairs of scissors running around. And so rewind a few years before this actual ribbon cutting, when we first found out City Hall was going to become available, I emailed employees and asked them, what are your suggestions? What do you want in our dream campus? And I toured some amazing campuses like Apple and Nike, Google. Nike, I remember there's one building that had this running track around it, and another building had an on-site pub, and we thought to ourselves, we need one of those as well. And so I came up with our own list of ideas and combined it with employee suggestions, and the number one request, actually, so employees came up with literally hundreds of suggestions, but the number one request we got from employees was actually doggy daycare. More than human daycare. And so as we started getting all these requests, we realized a couple things. One was that it was going to just be physically impossible to fit all 100, I think it was 200 or 300 requests into one building. But then the other thing we realized was that all those other campuses that I just mentioned, Apple, Nike, Google, were great for employees, but didn't really integrate or contribute to the community around them. And so we started thinking, what if we actually turned the entire concept inside out? What if instead of just focusing on ourselves, we took an approach that was more analogous to NYU, where the campus kind of blends in with the city and you don't really know where one begins and the other ends. And what if we actually encourage our employees to leave campus and encourage people from the community to come onto our campus. And so we've done a number of community events on campus where we're trying to get more and more people from the community onto our campus and vice versa. And this was right around the same time where myself and a bunch of other Zappos employees discovered this area of Vegas that most tourists don't know about, and I would say probably even a lot of locals don't know about, called Fremont East. And so most people, when they think Vegas, think about the big casinos on the Strip, which turns out those aren't actually even within the city limits of Vegas, of the city. And or if they know anything about downtown, it's the old casinos, the overhead light show, and so on. But if you actually just go a few blocks east, there's this area called Fremont East that you would have no idea you're in Vegas. There's no gaming. If you go into the bars, lounges, coffee shops, and so on, it's almost the complete opposite of the Strip. And the vibe there is actually very much in line with Zappos's values and culture. And it was just one of those things that was a coincidence that was just too good to be true. And it's just a few blocks away from the former city hall. And so, at the time when we first got involved and were thinking about moving City Hall there, our employees actually had a lot of concerns about safety and so on because we were in a suburb and now moving into a downtown neighborhood. And so we actually, for Zappos, in terms of what's next, the answer actually came just almost on its own, serendipitously. We decided to add a fourth C, which is about community. And so we've been trying to weave all all four C's into our various customer touch points. So for example, a couple months ago, we held a skateboarding event downtown where there were skate ramps and professional skateboarders competing. It was free to the community. And then we also had our employees come, a fun bonding event, so that helped build company culture. And then we captured on video, so for customers that are interested in skateboarding shoes from Zappos, we can provide that content to them. And through that process, we kind of weave in the story of our company culture and the stuff going on in the community around downtown Vegas. And so our goal is to kind of integrate all four of these C's in everything that we do at Zappos. So that's the Zappos side of it. Now I'm going to switch gears and talk about Downtown Project, which is a separate company from Zappos. Zappos actually was acquired by Amazon, I think about 5 years ago, but we basically treat them as our board of directors, and so they allow us to run independently. We have our own separate culture, our own separate way of doing business, and our own separate brand. Downtown Project is just funded by myself and a few other friends, early Zappos employees. And we don't have any outside investors, and the reason is because we really wanted to take a long-term approach to everything that we're doing. And so it has a $350 million budget, and you can see roughly how it's broken up. And there's a few different goals. One is to help create a place where you have everything you need to live, work, play within walking distance. And Vegas, for the most part, especially in the suburbs where most people live, is a very car-focused town. It helped make downtown Vegas the most community-focused large city in the world, and probably the place most people in the world would least expect it, and helped make Vegas the co-learning and co-working capital of the world. And so co-working started out as this concept, I think it was probably 10 years ago or so, maybe longer, where a bunch of small tech companies would work out the same physical space. It could be a room this size or maybe twice as big. And what they found through that was that there were a lot of serendipitous interactions that happened, and people would start collaborating in unexpected ways or overhear conversations and start sharing ideas and contacts. And so it actually drove a lot of innovation and productivity. And since then, in the tech world, actually, the co-working has become so successful that there are literally thousands and thousands of co-working spaces all around the world. But now it's actually evolved beyond just tech. There's photography co-working spaces and fashion-related and culinary. And you can really imagine co-working space around anything you can have a community around. And so that's something that we're focused on having happen. And one of our learnings, actually, over the past we've been at it for just under 3 years now on the Downtown Project side, was that the word community means something very different from the world that I come from, which is the tech world, where if online you create a website and you're talking about online communities, there's a different set of expectations than when you're actually talking about a physical neighborhood. And so over the past year or so, we actually redefined exactly what we're focused on to help create clarity. So we have our own 3 Cs: collisions, co-learning, and connectedness. And by collisions, we mean serendipitous interactions. People basically being in a public or semi-public place like a restaurant or sidewalk. And we have metrics associated with that I'll share in a little bit. Co-learning, meaning trying to get people in the community to actually learn from each other. So a small business might be interested in or might be really great at PR, and another small business might be great at bookkeeping, and so we're trying to create environments and systems where they can help each other and help the community become smarter and smarter on its own. And connectedness, meaning the number and depth of relationships, and combined with density and diversity. And the reason why that's important is because research has shown most innovation actually comes from something outside your industry being applied to your own. So we're really interested in trying to get people from completely different industries that are entrepreneurial and creative, get them in a relatively small space together and watch the collisions happen, and just statistically the magic kind of will happen on its own. So almost think of it as scaling the co-working concept. And so the big bet is, focus on these 3 Cs, and not only will that lead to a happier and luckier community, but actually innovation and productivity increases. And so what makes us different from most other real estate developers that have these short or medium-term ROI or cash flow needs, we're really focused on maximizing the long-term ROC, return on community and return on collisions. And there's also this acronym I stole from Jim Collins' latest book, Great by Choice, ROL, return on luck. And really thinking about how do you actually accelerate serendipity in a physical environment. And I'll share some of the things that we're doing in a few slides. So we have $50 million set aside in small businesses, and this was actually a picture of my apartment wall from maybe a year and a half ago. And we used to have tours that would literally go through my apartment, and as people were going through, we'd just ask them, what do you want in your dream neighborhood? And if it wasn't already on the wall, we'd encourage them to write it down, put it on the wall, and then it's an idea that we would consider investing in. The other actually really cool thing was every once in a while, we'd get someone whose lifelong dream was to, say, retire 10 years from now and start a cupcake bakery or something. And we'd say, well, rather than wait 10 years, why don't you just start that now? We'll invest in you, and it'll help create more collision points. It'll help grow the neighborhood. And so there's a few different criteria, and I'll just list them all here. And so we want them to be owner-operated. First, unique, or best is really important to us. We've had people come to us and say, oh, there's this great restaurant chain in 7 other cities, and you should have one here too. And we actually say no to those because we want to have our own identity. And then the second one is also really important. We invest in entrepreneurs that care more than just about themselves or their specific business, but actually have a bias to be helpful and collaborative with other entrepreneurs and other small businesses. And then the cool thing about that is it just becomes this positive feedback loop. And it's kind of analogous to how at Zappos we do a separate set of interviews for values, fit, and culture. And here we're really looking for entrepreneurs, and we want the entrepreneurs to be diverse and from different industries. And so really the main characteristic is we want them to have a bias to be helpful and help other entrepreneurs. So this is Natalie, who I serendipitously met maybe two and a half years ago at the local coffee shop. And she had been working as a chef for the past 10 years in one of the big casinos, and had actually just quit her job and packed up her bags and was actually ready to leave Vegas and move out of state. And as I started talking to her, I learned that her lifelong dream was to open up her own breakfast and lunch place. And so she actually was one of our first investments, and you can see this under construction. And oh, by the way, I'm not really a PowerPoint person, but I'm very proud of this transition, so we'll rewatch it, see how it just kind of appears around her. So this is her under construction, and then she's been open up, I think almost 2 years now, But at the 1 year and 3 month mark, she paid back her entire original investment. And I think she's doing something like triple her initial projections. She's now on track to actually, we're investing in helping her open a second concept, which is about fried chicken and Chinese food. That's a combination that's never been done before. And she's also been mentoring other first-time restaurant entrepreneurs. So it's just one of those things, and living, her dream. She thinks of this place as her living room. And the other cool thing is that this has created a new collision point for the community. So if you live there and you go have breakfast or lunch there, chances are during that hour you'll run into 5 or 10 people just during that hour. And so our whole goal, this is just one example, is to invest in a bunch of small businesses, literally probably about 100 or so small businesses, and each of them creates, we think of as a collision point. We also opened up just under a year ago, I think what might be the world's largest shipping container park. And so that's actually a praying mantis from Burning Man that shoots out 20-foot flames. And then outside 2 years ago, like right at that entrance, I personally, if I was standing there by myself at night, would have felt very uneasy from a safety perspective. And so we were trying to create a place where you would never see kids or family around downtown. And so we were trying to create a place that kind of had the vibe of a backyard barbecue pool party where the kids are having fun by themselves and the adults can enjoy a beer or eat some food and know their kids are safe. And so this was what came out of it. And so basically there's, off of the screen, there's a stage with live music playing, and in the middle is kind of like a kid's paradise. And I don't think there's any great photos, but there's a kind of 40-foot tall Swiss Family Robinson type of treehouse, and the adults can enjoy their wine and cheese, watch live music, and know that their kids are safe. And so this opened just under a year ago, and we've had well over 1 million visitors during that time. And if you go there on weekends, sometimes there's a wait for that. There's a giant slide that comes down of the treehouse. So that's part of it. And then the other part of it is that we think of it as a small business incubator. So there's about 40 units in there, and they're on short-term leases. And for a lot of them, it's actually their first foray into considering being a small business. So they can try out a concept, and you can see this is an example of one of the entrepreneurs that has never opened up a store before, and see if it works, and maybe they learn through the process that they're really more passionate about something else. Or we've also had ideas that have worked out well and are doing really well in there, and then that might be something that we invest into them in the future for a larger location or more permanent space. This is Ernie, he goes by both names. He was actually a Zappos employee several years ago, working in our call center, and then quit his job at Zappos to pursue his passion in barbecue. And so he was going to farmers markets and selling the barbecue meat and barbecue sauce, and literally a year and a half ago, he was on the sidewalk selling maybe $100 a day of barbecue meat and barbecue sauce. And we decided to invest in him because he was so passionate about everything that he was doing. And I happened to be walking by one summer, and that's literally his restaurant being lowered behind him. And so he went from selling about $100 a day to now he's doing over $150,000 a month with about 15 employees and living his dream and fulfilling his passion. And I think he may be actually one of the top, well, I know he's one of the top, he may even be our top restaurant in the entire container park. We opened up a health clinic, actually Stanford doctor that was here at Stanford Hospital for 10 years. And really this is focused on basically healthcare instead of sick care. So it's a membership model where it pays $80 a month either by the individual or by the employer, and then doubling down on primary and preventative care. And the early indications show that within a 2 or 3 years timeline, you get the ROI from an employer perspective. And so they have health coaches that will check in on you daily if needed and offer yoga classes and so on. We've set aside $50 million to invest in tech companies, and so in the past 2 or so years, we've invested in right about 100 tech companies that we've relocated from other states or even countries actually to downtown Vegas. And before there were a handful of tech companies around, but there wasn't really a place for them to all centralize and gather. And so now there are various tech co-working spaces and tech startups all in the downtown Vegas area. One of them actually just launched a couple weeks ago called Hsieh. The original name was Project 100, where we actually placed the largest order in the US for Teslas, ordered 100 Teslas, combined with other electric vehicles and a shared bike program. And the idea was really to just get people to get rid of their cars. And when we asked these startups why they chose downtown Vegas instead of the more obvious Silicon Valley and so on, they say for 2 reasons. One is really the sense of community that is there in downtown Vegas. And the other is, and that's actually not just on the tech side, that's actually what really attracted me to the Fremont East area I was talking about earlier, is because I grew up in San Francisco, but it's actually the most community-focused place I've ever lived. I've never lived in a place where the bar owners and restaurant owners and cafe owners all hang out in each other's places just to support each other. And so that's part of the reason why the vibe just felt so great for Zappos' corporate headquarters relocation. But the same thing is true on the tech side, because when we make investments, we also look for entrepreneurs that have a bias to think more than just about themselves or their companies. And so that's one of the reasons. And the other reason is because it's this whole idea of thinking of the city as a startup, and how many opportunities do you have in a lifetime to help shape the future of a major city. We also opened up a school called Bridge that is starting at 6 weeks old, is teaching kids entrepreneurship and creativity using the latest neuroscience research, and eventually we'll go all the way to 12th grade. We're basically adding a grade or 2 every year. And this just happened yesterday. There's a monthly festival called First Friday that we do every month, and draws 20,000 to 25,000 people. And that's also something that is evolved over time to be really kid and family friendly, and helps bring out a lot of the local small businesses and artists and entrepreneurs. And so we have tents there where I think it's for $100 or so, anyone can buy a tent for that night, and then they can test out whatever concept they're testing out. And so we actually lose money on each tent that gets set up, but it's a way for us to support the community, and then we also get to discover some great entrepreneurs. And one example is there's a local beef jerky producer that did really well at First Friday and still does really well at First Friday, and then we gave him a space at Container Park, and he's doing really well there, and so now they're looking to expand. So it's pretty exciting to see those types of stories come from like a $100 tent that happens every month. And we really just view this as just kind of our donation to the community. The interesting thing about this is the bigger it gets, the more money we lose. And so, right, because of the additional security and so on, and we're not really, it's not a revenue source for us. And so each month we throw it actually ends up costing us about $50,000 or so. We're bringing large-scale art to downtown Vegas, and this is also from Burning Man. You can actually crawl up in there and put a DJ on top. And so our thought is actually every block or so to put some large-scale piece of art or some fire element. This is the praying mantis at the opening of a Mexican restaurant we invested in. And basically trick people into walking just one more block, and then one more block, and one more block, and that'll result in more collisions over time. We actually, last year was the first year we threw a festival called Life is Beautiful, and we just 2 weeks ago did the second year, and we had close to 100,000 people come over 3 days this year, and last year was a 2-day festival. But it's actually 4 festivals in one, and so this is the footprint of year one, where we had, it's its own music festival. We had 65 bands. First year we had Killers, Imagine Dragons, Kings of Leon. This year we had Lionel Richie and Outkast, and then it's its own culinary festival, so 40 celebrity chefs. And then there were some pretty fun pairings where the celebrity chef would be paired next to a band member of some famous band, and then they do cooking lessons together. And its own art festival. So first year, I think we had about 16 murals go up, and then this year we added to that as well. And the cool thing is after the festival, 90% of those murals actually still are up, and so it helps beautify the city in the process. And each year the festival goes on, we'll just paint more and more of the city, and there are artists from all over the world contributing to this. And then its own learning festival. So there's different great speakers and talking about all different types of topics. And I think there were about 40 or so this year. And so I actually have a video. It'll give you, I really like this video because it, a lot of marketing or videos that are recaps make the event seem better than it actually was. And this one was actually put together by one of our other small business investments, Downtown Films. And this is from the first year. They're still in the process of editing the second year. And what I like about this is that it really perfectly, like I never get sick of watching the video because it so perfectly captures the vibe of the festival, and it's all ages. And so let's play the video. So the really cool thing that happened after the festival is for both years is then we heard back from the local small businesses, because most of the people that went to the festival in both years, that was their first time ever being in that area of downtown Vegas. And so the local businesses reported that their business was up in the subsequent weeks. This is a book I recommend to a lot of people, even if they're not interested in city stuff, that's written by someone in this room. Oh, there. So I hope now, it's kind of weird with him being here to talk about. So tell me if I'm saying that. I normally say written by a Harvard economics professor that studied cities from all different time periods, including Rome, New York, Detroit, and looked at why some thrived and some didn't. Good? Okay. And then I say, a lot of the findings in his book are really counterintuitive, but they actually guide a lot of our philosophies. And then I can't remember if this is in your book, because it's every time the size of a city doubles, innovation or productivity per resident increases by 15%. I know Jeffrey Moore talks about it too, but anyways, there's these amazing people like Ed Glazier and Jeffrey Moore, and that are guiding a lot of our thinking. And and I don't think he made up this phrase, but one of the phrases that he refers to in his book that I really liked was talking about how a lot of city redevelopers have this thing called the edifice complex, where they think if you just build a building, then suddenly magic will happen on its own. And we're really more focused on, I guess, what I would describe as the negative space, the in-between, the human interactions and what the spaces and the collisions that they can result in. And so also Jeffrey Moore talks about every time the size of a city doubles, innovation or productivity per resident increases by 15%. But the opposite happens with companies. As they get bigger, usually innovation or productivity per employee goes down. So from the Zappos perspective, we're doing a lot of thinking about how do we avoid that fate, and how do we actually restructure Zappos so that we're more like a city and less like a big bureaucratic hierarchy. And that's part of the reason why we actually want interactions between employees and the surrounding community from people from all different industries, so that we don't become too insular, and we're not really, because ultimately when companies stop looking outside of themselves is when the decline generally starts. So the ingredients for this are 100 residents per acre, combined with street level activity, so all those post-it notes you saw for those residents to collide. And the third is, I think, the hardest, but also the cheapest, and the one that gives you the most leverage, this culture of openness, collaboration, and sharing. And I think of that as almost like a multiplier. So if people are twice as likely to talk to each other, then maybe you only need half the residential density. And so it turns out that a lot of the stuff that we were doing over the years at Zappos to help build company culture, we were always thinking about how do we get employees to collide in an office environment, actually apply at the city level as well, just at a different scale. And we've done a lot of thinking and research on office density. So average office density in the US is 200 or 300 square feet per employee. At Zappos, we were at 120 square feet per employee. We're actually now at about 100 square feet per employee. And the reason we've really focused on that in the office environment is because research has shown that if you sit twice as far away from someone, you don't see them half as often. You see them half as often squared, so a quarter as often. And so we think about that density on the city level. And then the other weird thing we do for both Zappos and on the downtown project side is we prioritize collisions over convenience. So this is our office now, and so off the screen here, that's a skybridge that goes into a parking structure. And when the city employees used to work out here, they park in the structure, go in the skybridge, and then wind up at their offices. Well, we actually purposely shut down the skybridge, which forces employees out into the streets and more collision opportunities with each other and with the community. And then they go through the central plaza, which serves as another collision point. And that's also where we hold a lot of our community events. And so on the downtown project side, there's office buildings that we own that have plenty of parking in them, but we've purposely set some of the leases so that you have to park 1 or 2 blocks away. and then the people that park in that building might actually have offices a couple blocks away, so you get more collision opportunities and so on. And then the people that don't like it then don't sign the lease with us. And so, but we basically try to set that expectation up front and then just build it into people's daily routines, these additional collision opportunities. So the big bet is, and this is just a partial list now, get together all these different diverse entrepreneurial and creative types in a relatively small space, and statistically the magic just happens on its own. So when we first started this, we thought that we'd have to either convince people to get to that 100 residents per acre. The only way we can mathematically think of how to do that was we needed to invest a lot of money into building high-rises or convince people to live in really small spaces. And then started thinking, okay, why do we actually care about residents? What is the value of a resident? And if you imagine there's some guy that, say, lives in his apartment but never leaves the house or his apartment and therefore never has any collisions, he actually doesn't add value to the community because he's just, even though he's technically a resident. And so started thinking about, okay, why do we actually care about having residents there? And started doing the math on someone like me. So when I'm in town, I'm out and about in a collisionable way 3 or 4 hours a day, meaning like walking down the sidewalk in a bar or a restaurant, cafe, and so on, public or semi-public place. Times 7 days a week, I travel a lot, so call it 40 weeks a year. Do the math, it works out to the value of a resident like me is about 1,000 collisionable hours a year. And then this is a guy named Jake who lives in New York. Tried to convince him to move to downtown Vegas, but for various reasons, he couldn't. And he actually had the most successful fashion-related Kickstarter campaign when I met him. I think it was about a year and a half or 2 years ago. Raised almost $300,000 on Kickstarter. Since then, he broke that record actually this past summer, raised over $1 million on Kickstarter. And there's this emerging fashion scene. There's a fashion incubator and all these local designers now. And so we told him about the scene, tried to convince him to move. He wouldn't, but he committed to actually coming to downtown Vegas on a regular basis, once a month, and then doing things like having office hours and mentoring other fashion entrepreneurs and doing talks, including one that I saw that was super interesting, that was about how do you do a really good Kickstarter campaign. And as a complete aside, this is just one of the things on that topic, how to do a really good Kickstarter campaign. One of the things he taught was, and it's interesting rewatching the videos now, having watched his talk, is you start out a Kickstarter campaign with a question, or he starts out a Kickstarter campaign with a question that you can't say no to. And so I forget which Kickstarter video it was. It starts out with, do you want to know a secret? And he's like, nobody says, no, I know enough secrets. I don't need to know anything else. And so it's just interesting watching him deconstruct how to do a good Kickstarter campaign. Anyway, so he's been doing these talks, and even though he's technically not a resident of downtown Vegas, when he walks down the street, people recognize him, and he'll get stopped and have these collisions and so on. And so he's part of the community, even though he's not a resident. And so we actually started doing the math on someone like Jake. What's the value of a purposeful visitor that still actively contributes to the community? And so when he's in Vegas, he's out and about 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, 12 times a year. It actually works out to about 1,000 collisional hours a year for a purposeful visitor like Jake. And so while we still want people to move to downtown Vegas, now we have this interesting thing that we can layer on top to help accelerate everything, create more collisions, and therefore more idea flow and innovation. And so what we've been calling people like Jake are they're subscribers of downtown Vegas. So there's some people that come quarterly, and I don't know, Tim seems to come, I don't know, every other month or something. So it's been interesting in different areas, just seeing people kind of still be part of the community that way. And so we basically decided to change this formula. Instead of 100 residents per acre, we changed it to 100,000 collisional community hours per acre per year, which works out to 2.3 collisional hours per square foot per year, which gives us just a whole new lens through which to really think about our investment. So if we're investing in a, say, 3,000 square foot restaurant, then in addition to it being a good investment on its own, in addition to our requirement that the entrepreneur needs to care about the community, not just themselves and their business, now we have this additional filter where we need to see we can do the estimates on number of customers, how long they'll be there, times 3,000 square feet, and see whether it's yielding at least 2.3 collisional hours per square foot per year. And the other cool thing is this actually allows us to be a lot more agnostic about, it's not us judging ideas, because we're really anti-top-down master planning, and so it's not us saying, oh, we need a yoga studio, or oh, we need a Mexican restaurant or whatever. We're really much more focused on the entrepreneur, and it's really about supporting their passion, whatever that might be. It wasn't our idea to have a breakfast and lunch place, it was police. And so with that, we'll support any idea, but we do require this as one of the filters that they have to pass in addition to the other ones that I mentioned earlier. And then also, it's all in the context of collisions, co-learning, connectedness, diversity, and density. And so, yes, we don't want 1,000 Mexican restaurants because that wouldn't fill the diversity part of the formula. And so the big bet is by focusing on these 3 C's, what we want people to say about downtown, whether they're just visiting for the first time or subscribing or are a resident there, is that downtown Vegas will make you smarter, which is probably the last thing most people would expect from downtown or Vegas. So I'm involved in a few different companies. There's Zappos. Delivering Happiness is a separate company actually based out of the Bay Area that was spun off of the book, has its own separate CEO, and they're focused on helping companies figure out their values and build their own strong cultures. And Downtown Project. And so we try to weave some inspirational theme throughout these different companies. And I'm sure everyone in this room knows this, but most people actually don't know this outside of this people that are studying cities, is that this threshold that we just passed, I think within the past few years, where 50% of all humans now live in cities, and first time ever in all history, I guess. And within our lifetime, it'll jump up to 75%. So we view what we're doing as much bigger than just about downtown Vegas or the Vegas area in general. We're actually inspired by the story of the 4-minute mile, where for the longest time, people thought it was impossible to run a mile in under 4 minutes. Or they thought, oh, even if you could, as soon as you crossed the finish line, something bad would happen. You'd collapse and die or something. And then in 1954, this guy named Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. But what I find really interesting is that in less than a year, other people broke the 4-minute mile. And it wasn't that nutrition was better on Earth that year, it was just people believed it was possible. And so, if a lot of city revitalization projects depend on having Stanford or Harvard or a stadium or sports team, and not every city or community can afford those or can have access to those. And so we purposely chose the 3 C's of collisions, co-learning, and connectedness because we wanted something that could be replicated to other communities and cities. And so our hope is that if we can help make downtown Vegas a place of inspiration, downtown Vegas being a place probably voted by most as least likely to succeed, if we can help make downtown Vegas a place of inspiration and entrepreneurial energy and creativity and innovation and upward mobility and discovery and all that good stuff, if we can do it in downtown Vegas, then maybe we can serve as the 4-minute mile for the world. So for anyone that wants a copy of this presentation, and actually I have to leave after this talk, so if anyone would like to come visit, just email me, tony@zappos.com. And I just want to end on that quote that I said, if you only remember one thing, a great brand is a story that never stops unfolding. Same is true for a company, same is true for a city, and same is true for a community. And that's why I am so excited to be a resident of downtown Vegas right now because I can't wait to see what unfolds next. Thank you very much.